Hey guys, it's Q&A time. Everything you've been asking me about giftedness and homeschooling, I've got your answers here, as well as some tips from you guys and encouragement from you guys out there that I wanted to share with everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathleen Lewis. I am a homeschool graduate and I am a homeschool mom to two. I have a 4-year-old who is gifted and an almost 2-year-old. I can't believe it, she's almost 2. So this video is going to be a little bit different than my normal. I normally like to keep them short and sweet, respectful of your time as busy moms, and also straight to the point, because many of you out there are probably gifted like me, and we gifted individuals just tend to hate small talk. So this is going to be a little bit more chatty than my norm, but stick with me. I've got a lot of good content for you in here, questions that you guys have been asking me that I've either not been able to satisfy myself with answering thoroughly or just have been beyond the scope of comments. So before we get into all the Q&As, I want to start out with some encouragement to you. You guys are not alone. Here are some comments from parents just like you put onto some of my videos. My son has huge emotions and figuring out how to handle the frustration is a challenge. Right there with you, mama. Yes, gifted individuals, particularly younger kids, do have issues with emotional control. I'm dealing with feeling like I'm not prepared with all that I need to challenge my son and feed his love of learning. Yes, you feel like you can't keep up. I'm struggling with balancing the intellectual stimulation and age-appropriate activities for my 2-year-old. She acts and talks like a 5-year-old in 2 languages, and then she's struggling with riding a bike. I often forget she's only 2. Her motor skills and physical abilities are age-appropriate, but her brain is faster than I can provide for. Phew! Yep, mama, right there with you. And then there's this comment. What I buy that I think, oh, this will keep him busy, he flies through in 2 to 4 weeks, where the guide says a year. The intensity is unmatched. So yes, parenting a gifted kid is intense. It is unrivaled with the intensity. And that is just because of how our brains work. So right there with you parents, I feel you. One more thing I need to cover before I get into your Q&As. One of you asked me about whether my son was tested. And we had a good discussion about testing and giftedness. So I need to clarify. No, my son is not officially diagnosed, and I'm going to put that in quotes. He has not been tested. He is for experts, different opinions, whether you can test accurately at 5, 6, or 7. But essentially, to get an official diagnosis, my son needs to be a little bit older. Having said that, there are many experts in gifted education that say testing is unnecessary. If you have a gifted kid, it is obvious. Testing and official diagnosis is only useful if you want to take advantage of some of the programs out there for gifted kids. For example, the Daviston Institute has a phenomenal program, from what I've heard, for profoundly gifted kids. So if you have a profoundly gifted kid, you may want to get your kid tested so he can or she can get into that program. Or maybe there's other programs like that, that you need an official verification to get the assistance. To get access to those programs. So that is one reason for testing. And another reason to get tested is if there's twice exceptionalities, which means your son is gifted and autistic, or gifted and dyslexic, or dysgraphia, or so many of these other things. So that would be a point that you may need therapists to help out with some of these other things in addition to your giftedness. But I do take the holistic view of giftedness, where it's not all about the IQ and cognitive abilities, because a gifted mind is wired so intensely, so differently than a typical brain, that we experience the entire world to a different degree, to a different level. And if you want to know more about that, I have been making videos. I'm going to link a playlist right here. Right here. So go check that out, and I'll be adding to that continually with more content on giftedness. And if you want more information beyond that, I've got a huge list of resources down in the description for you. Books, podcasts, websites. Go to it. I have not finished going through all of it, but I wanted to make sure it's available to you in case you wanted it. Okay, let's get into the questions you guys have asked me. So the first question is, I'm curious what curriculum you did as a child and what worked well for you as a gifted learner. That's a loaded one. I did not find out I was gifted until about a year ago. So my childhood was from the perspective of an unidentified gifted kid. There are some hallmarks that my mom did not know about. So my mom told me I essentially taught myself to read when I was 4. I do remember reading chapter books before I got into elementary school. I was a fast learner. I did not take much time to do education, to do any of my assignments. And I really only had to sit down and go through, for example, understanding a science concept or math concept once, and then didn't have to review it. So I did not study really at all for any of the tests. We did do traditional school, mid-elementary into high school. Younger years, it was a lot of unit studies, some traditional. We tried a Becca, which I ended up hating. But about 4th, 5th grade was when my mom switched almost completely to BGU Press. And then later on, we were one of the first families to get onto what was then HomeSat, and is now the videos, the online videos that you can access. So that was very traditional. This was back in the 90s, let me say. So there weren't a whole lot of homeschool curriculum options out there. Not as many as amazing, not all the amazing stuff that is available now, but there really weren't many options out there. So we chose the traditional route. But one thing my mom brilliantly did, which I think saved her a ton of emotional trauma, was she got each of us kids a library card, our own library cards, when we were very young. She told me recently that that was because of the lending limits at the library. She wanted to check out more books, so she just got more library cards. But I do remember very early on, when I was like 6 or 7, pretty much being given free rein in the children's section at the library. I could get any book I wanted to take home. And that served me very well in elementary. If I was interested in a subject, I would go check out 10 books on it. I remember probably around when I was 9 or 10, I had a huge interest in oceanography. So I had exhausted all the books in the kids section and went to the adult section. There was like a giant, big, fat encyclopedia of shells that I borrowed from the adult section and was reading it just for fun. So I did that. I did a lot of free reading. I guess you can call it the unschooling approach to education, in addition to traditional. Now, traditional education for me, I was done with in an hour. And then when I got to junior high and high school, I really did not have to study either. So that left me a ton of time to explore other interests, hobbies. We did a lot of 4-H. My mom was amazing that if any of us kids expressed an interest in doing something and discovering something, she would find a way to give us that experience. So I did a lot more of that than my siblings. But yes, that was, I guess, another way we rounded out our education. So there were some other things in there, but that is essentially how I was educated as an unidentified gifted person. I rewatched what I recorded and realized I completely missed a question and a big part of another question. So let me correct those. The next question here is how to find a detailed science for gifted child, but not too deep that it's boring. That is the $1,000,000 question, isn't it, for any gifted child? The context for this question, I believe you're using a Becca, and you may have asked about history too. If not, I actually got a whole bunch of questions on my last video, so let me throw history in here too. Since you're using a Becca, I'm assuming you want a Christian curriculum for your science. And my #1 recommendation for Christian curriculum for gifted kid is Apologia. It is a great low prep thing for you as the mom. It is very independent. It is accessible to kids who can't read yet. And it is in depth, but not too much you go crazy, which is exactly what you're talking about. It has great hands-on activities with it. And if you're wanting a little bit more specific review, I've got one review out on Apologia. I'll put that up in the iCards. Over here, I think. Up in the iCards. And you can go check that out. For secular, I am using this semester Blossom and Root, and I'm using the level 4 physics and engineering. I love what I see so far. It is a bit more work for you as the parent trying to collect all the books from the library, and then pre-watching all the videos that go along with it, and of course prepping for the activities, which if you do Apologia, there's a kit you can buy that has all the supplies in it, and there's no extra books that are required. So it's a little bit more work for Blossom and Root. I really love what I'm seeing. You can go as in-depth as your kid wants, and yeah, I love it. I don't know about a textbook for a gifted curriculum for science for secular. So if you guys have any ideas, drop those down in the comments. I have a couple more that I'm considering and looking at to recommend to you guys, but I have not gotten my hands on them yet, so I can't say one way or the other whether or not they'd be good. Now for history, that's a question a lot of you guys asked in my most recent video on Story of the World. And I, at this point, have not had my hands on a curriculum, so I can say definitively it's great for gifted kid, or it doesn't have any major errors. But I do have two recommendations that I'm just going to throw out there with the caveat of it looks good from the samples I've seen. The first one would be if your secular history quest looks amazing. Again, it's kind of set up like Story of the World, where it's a book that your kid reads or listens to, and then there's a whole bunch of supplemental books and activities that your kid can do. It looks really good, and your child can go as deep as he or she wants into the curriculum, into the topics. For a person who wants a Christian perspective on their history, I would personally recommend Biblioplan, and definitely go with the family guide, not the textbook by itself, but the family guide. That is the power of that curriculum, because it takes a lot of the major curriculums out there. Mr. History, Biblioplan's own textbook. It has Story of the World. I think there's one or two more history textbooks that they use, and actually schedule out everything for you based on their plan, and then provide you with the extra books and extra activities, videos, all of those things. So again, it's set up so that you can go as deep as you want, or spend as little time as you want. So I think those would be two really good things setup-wise for a gifted kid. Okay, the next one is bedtime is a struggle. It takes him forever to fall asleep, and he's almost 7. Any suggestions? A certain time to turn off or switch off the TV to help with bedtime? That is a hard one. Yes, insomnia is a huge issue that gifted people have. If you want more details on that, check up in the iCards. I made a video just for that. But essentially, gifted brains have more, I'm going to put it like this, mental energy. So during the day, we can physically do things to relieve some of that mental energy. And that's why some of us actually fidget, because we need an outlet for the energy. So some of us may be falsely identified as ADHD because of that. So yes, mental energy, when you're going to bed, there's no place for that energy to go anymore. You can't do anything with it. So your mind starts spinning. And for me, I have had a long list of tips and tricks to deal with that over my lifetime. When I was a kid, I didn't know anything about this. So I started telling myself a bedtime story, an ongoing bedtime story, to entertain myself. And actually, I still do that if I can't get to sleep. But one of the biggest things, and I cover it in the video, I let reference, but one of the biggest things you can do is to set up a bedtime routine, because you can train your brain. This is the time of day to go to sleep, and definitely turn off the visual stimulation of the TV. That is a big thing too. Okay, next question. How do you keep yourself from becoming overstimulated as a gifted homeschool mom? Let me show you one secret that I do have. Be right back. Okay, I forgot to grab this before. I have noise canceling earbuds that I got this year, and they are amazing. They don't block out all noise, so don't have that expectation going in. They do best with repetitive stuff, but they are kind of acting like earplugs too. I typically put these in towards the end of the day when I have had enough of the kids' noise. It just dulls it a little bit for me. And hearing is one of my sensitivities. Hearing too much noise, too much auditory stimulation will set off my huge emotions very quickly. So no one wants a cranky mommy, so that's something I am working on. Another thing that I do is independence. I have a ton of things for my 4-year-old to do in the afternoon, and I have my time, me time. I block myself off in my bedroom so he doesn't have access to me. And that is a time for me to regulate myself. For the morning, one of the biggest things that has helped me is getting outside for some period of time. Yes, you bring the kids out with you and all their noises, but nature was designed perfectly for our neural system to be exactly the right level of sensory input for us. So that is the best way to, again, help with regulation if you've got kids around, particularly if you have a fenced-in backyard. Let the kids run wild while you can kind of sit apart and just stare up at the clouds or whatever you need to do to clear your headspace. Another thing I do to help with my son, who is a auditory seeker, we're having a little bit of friction in our house because too much sound drives me up the wall, and he is constantly making sound and needs sound. He is a sensory seeker, which, just FYI, that's not gifted specific. You can have non-gifted kids be sensory seekers as well. But for him, he is constantly needing some kind of sensory sound input. So I have headphones. I have headphones that he can put on for audiobooks, for music, and that makes him shut his mouth so he's not asking me all the questions and not making all the random noises that he does. So that's all I've got. If you guys have any more ideas on how to handle overstimulation as a parent, gifted or non-gifted, drop those down. Let's help each other out. Okay, time for an intermission. I have some tips from you guys that you've given to me, so I'm going to share them with all of you about educating a gifted kid. One of you said, I read somewhere that with non-gifted kids, you usually slow down when they struggle. With the gifted kids, however, you lean in because while in the moment they may resist, they do appreciate the challenge. Since I started doing this more with my oldest, I'm seeing we move much faster past the friction, as you called it, than we did before. I agree. I definitely see that with my son. If you give in too fast to the fighting you, the struggle with you of, I can't get it, I'm terrible at this. I think two things are happening there. One is you're confirming to them, yes, you are stupid because you can't get this within 5 seconds. The other is they never learn what it's like to have to work to understand something. And that is going to be a huge issue later on when they hit high school. Or maybe college, when they finally come up with the concept that they do have to work at in order to understand. So yes, make sure they struggle, push them through the struggle. And what happens is somehow, like this person said, a switch does get flipped while you're dealing with the emotional meltdown and everything and trying to push through that. A switch does get flipped in their mind of, okay, I'm going to conquer this. But meanwhile, you're sitting on the side coaching them saying, yeah, you can do that. I know you can do this. It's not too hard. I have a memory here that I'm going to share with you. From my sainted mother. Yes, Mom, you are a saint from having put up with me as a kid. I remember coming up against my first challenge in school, first challenge ever of something I could not understand. Mixed fractions. I think I was somewhere around 3rd or 4th grade. I mostly taught myself math through elementary from the textbook. But there was this one concept of mixed fractions, adding mixed fractions, I could not get. And I remember vividly sitting there in our dining room. We did school in our dining room at that time, having a meltdown, being so frustrated that I could not understand it. My mom's being very patient, trying to tutor me through it, trying to show me how everything works. And then finally the light bulb went off like after maybe 10 minutes of my bawling to her and fighting her and not wanting to work through the problem with her. And at that point, I'm pretty sure I said, okay, Mom, I've got it, go away. Not in those terms, but nonverbals and like, get away from me, Mom, I don't need your help anymore. So yes, I remember experiencing that with my first big struggle. And Mom, I know I've said this before, but you are a saint. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for having patience with me as you taught me. Okay, another tip from you guys is I struggled so much keeping up with my gifted son and homeschooling 2 other kiddos that a more child-led path worked well for him. He does his core subjects with me, but for content areas, he just naturally reads and loves history and science so much. I swear he learns more than when I tried to do a formal curriculum. Yes, as I said, that was my experience. When you let your gifted kids just go explore on their own, they do learn a whole lot more. And one thing she said right there is very key for gifted kids: independence. Yes, you can sit there with a core curriculum and teach them, or any curriculum and teach them, but I remember many occasions where my mom tried to sit me down with my siblings and do a group subject. Yeah. I would stomp off in frustration. I think once I stomped out into the rain, emotional drama and everything, frustrated because things were going so slow. So she did not try group subjects very often with us, I think mostly because of me. But give your kids independence. You don't even need to do core curriculum. Sometimes core curriculum's written for the parent to teach the child. I understand that, but as much as possible, try to give the child independence, because you do not have the time to teach them everything they need to their pace. Also, if you're sitting there trying to teach everything to them, they can read it like 3 times faster. And so you're slowing them down. And I know the experience of teaching your child is so fun. So here's a suggestion for you. You can do the group subjects. Give your gifted child if you want to do group subject with Apologia, since I was talking about it, give your child a textbook. Say, okay, make sure to read this section by the end of this week. And on Friday, we're going to get together with all the siblings and do the experiments. Doing things, activities as a group. I believe most gifted kids would love that. Having someone read a book to you, it's probably one of the biggest ways to get onto a gifted kid's bad side. Audiobooks, I also have problems with unless I was actively doing something. So my sister and I would turn on The Hobbit, Pride and Prejudice, Chronicles of Narnia, so many different things, and sew at the same time. So we were enjoying the book together, but doing something with our hands. I did appreciate that. So there's another suggestion for you. If you want to read to your gifted child, give them something to do, to accomplish with their hands, whether it's building Legos or a hobby or something like that. So yes, Mom, independence, you were brilliant in letting the child just go with their interests. That's absolutely phenomenal. If you're having fun and enjoying all these tips, be sure to bump that like button. Let me know it. Okay, let's get on to the next group of questions. What do you do when their brain is ready to move on, but fine motor skills are behind? For example, most curriculum includes worksheets that require writing letter number answers. My son understands the concept, but can't write it. What do you do? Yes, that is actually one of my biggest pet peeves. Combining motor skills, which every kid develops at a different rate, with cognitive skills, which every kid, gifted or non-gifted, develops at a different rate. Problem children here are math, and spelling and grammar, but very in particularly math. It seems like you cannot do math without writing, which is one of the reasons I have chosen Right Start. It is a curriculum that, yes, technically has some worksheets and is teaching them to write, but I don't do anything for the most part with my son that makes him write, because the ability to do math should not be contingent upon his ability to write. So if there is any writing involved, for the most part, I am his scribe, unless he stubbornly says, no, mommy, I want to do this. In which case, I use him writing as a reward for him not fighting doing extra problems. There's some more things. Let me go get those and I'll show you those. Okay, so I've got here a manipulative that was invented by Montessori over 100 years ago, and I am in love with most of her methodology for teaching math, because she makes math accessible for preschoolers and kindergartners who can't write yet. So this is something she invented. It's number cards. So their place value, teaching place value, and the important aspect of that. But you can build your number like this. So for my son, 9, 6, 9, I'm not sure which that one is. I'm going to call it a 6. So for my son, when we're doing math problems, no, that's a 9. I give him this set of manipulatives right here, and when he gets the answer, he can create it like this. As I mentioned, you can scribe for your child if you're doing like a notebooking type thing, and then they can color or scrapbook or whatever they want into the notebook. Same thing with worksheets. You can scribe for your child. If it's history or science, just give me the answer. I'll write it in the blank for you. Or another option is this that I got off of Amazon. It's Joy Note classroom magnet letters. So this again is mimicking something from Montessori. She did not have magnetic letters, but this is foam. And then on the back, it has magnets. And then it has a board that comes in here. So I don't like the all about reading letters that come with the materials. I do have the letter combinations there, but we mostly use this for reading. But you can pull this out for other things like grammar or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of letters in here that your child can use to build words. So that is an option for you as well. I would probably say my biggest recommendation for the asynchronous development of cognitive abilities versus fine motor skills would be for you to be your child's scribe, or to have everything oral, oral responses, and not expecting them to write it down. The other question I missed was, how do you teach him to read when he's a perfectionist and wants to do it correctly right away? I would appreciate any advice. Perfectionism and giftedness definitely frequently go hand in hand. I am a perfectionist. What you'll see happen is the child will either get frustrated very quickly because they're used to learning things fast. And if it's a subject that they're struggling in, which is, or even a skill-based subject that they actually have to work at, like reading or writing, then the big emotions come out. Actually, a classic example of perfectionism is Einstein. He did not talk until he was 3 years old because, he later said, I wanted to make sure I got it right with correct grammar, correct pronunciation, and I knew I could not do it yet, so I just chose not to speak. And that is what we get with our gifted kids and perfectionism, particularly when it's skill-based, as I said. So for reading, this is what I did with my son. For the initial blending skill, the skill of taking 2 letters to blend, I modeled a ton. And if you model, your child should be able to quickly catch on, oh, this is how you do it. So I didn't expect him to be able to get it from the beginning. And yeah, I modeled a ton. And once he got the idea down, I've had no issues since. The other thing you have to realize with perfectionism, with anything for a gifted child, is that you need to show them that it's okay for them to make mistakes. Model mistakes. You might be propping up their perfectionist tendencies by overpraising something that is perfect. I accidentally made a comment for my son. He drew a picture. I think it was a picture of a castle. And I mentioned something about, oh, that part doesn't look right, but everything else looks amazing. He went and redrew the picture because I pointed out a problem with it. So we have, as parents, have to be careful with perfectionistic kids, not to spur them on in that. It is good to point out things that should be corrected, definitely, but don't start pointing out every little thing that's wrong, because they will definitely be frustrated. I think the biggest tool in the toolbox for working with perfectionists is that showing mistakes are completely part of the process. So when you make a mistake in anything, make sure your kid knows it. Show it. And also maybe celebrate the mistake, saying, oh, I didn't mean to do that, but it's really cool because you see, I can take this project or this task or whatever this way. Or if you make a mistake and there's no way to remedy it, it's like, oh well, it's a learning thing for next time. So downplaying the mistakes, even celebrating the mistakes. There was a book I read, I can't remember the title now, it's something oops, but it's a children's book, and the artist shows how you can take a mistake in art and turn it into something else that's really amazing. Okay, next one. How do you know your child is retaining the information and actually understands what is being taught? Do I personally do tests or narration or something? With my child being 4, no. That's the short answer. With math, I have done a few assessments, but it's basically what he's used to with each lesson. I ask him a question and then he figures out the problem. And it's not long by any means. I'm not giving him 30 problems to work with. I'm giving him maybe 5. And that was what I would consider appropriate for a 4-year-old. Now, when he gets older, I will start having more formal tests. But that's probably not going to be until he gets maybe around 9 or 10 years old. My intention for the early years is to let him explore. Let him explore as much as possible to his heart's content. And then later I'll bring in some academics, more structured academics, until he gets to high school, which is going to be, yes, a lot more tests, essays, papers, that kind of thing, because that still is a useful tool. Test taking is very useful to understanding your child's retention, his knowledge. Even if it's an oral test, if you have a dyslexic kid, it is useful. So since I am not expecting a standard yet of retention, I'm not going to be very formal. There is going to be casual, informal evaluations, which is typically at dinner when I say, hey, Stephen, can you tell Daddy what you learned today? And most of the time he can't remember. So I give him cues like, hey, we read this book. What did you remember from this book? So it is very informal, and that is a great tool, the informal dinner conversation of narration, to borrow a Charlotte Mason term, to check understanding. But like I said, I'm not focused on, is he retaining everything right now? We'll get to that probably when he's in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around there is when we'll start being a little bit more formal on that. Now, I'm going to admit here, it is very hard when it comes to evaluations and gifted children, because their cognitive abilities are up here, but developmentally, they're right on level with where they should be physically. So there's a disconnect there, and it gets worse the more gifted, I'm going to put that in quotes too, your child is. So in case you don't know, there's levels of giftedness. Experts disagree, but generally the range of moderately gifted people, that is the biggest population of gifted people, is anywhere from 3 to 5% No, 3 to 4% of the entire world. Anywhere from 3 to 4% of the entire world is moderately gifted. And then you get up into the rarer giftedness levels of highly, exceptionally, and then finally profoundly gifted. Profoundly gifted is where Einstein would hang out. They are the literally 1 in a million. They are very rare. They're the outliers amongst the outliers. So those would be the kids who teach themselves to read when they're 2. Most gifted people hang out in the moderate world, and that is a different experience. So if you're dealing with an exceptionally, highly, or profoundly gifted kid, I feel for you. You have your own struggles, but within each of those levels, and it's going to be more challenging for you because the emotions will probably be more drastic. The cognitive abilities will be more disparaging from what they're physically capable of doing. So the frustrations will be increased. So yeah, it's a whole world in and of itself. So parents, if you do hang out there, you have my empathy with all the extra struggles and uniqueness of those kids. I think my son's moderately gifted, so I can't speak to your experiences, but I'm here for you. I will support you how I can, and the community's here for you. I know several of you out there have mentioned that your kid's probably in the profoundly gifted range, so you're not a lone parent. Okay, final question here. How would one plan for a gifted learner who has no idea what they want to do for a career or has lots of ideas? Dual enrollment, how much is maturity a factor if they can do all the work without any issues? So topic on transitions to higher education or other options with a gifted learner from homeschooling. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Gifted individuals, generally speaking, have interests in many different fields. We like learning new things. We find a lot of things intriguing, and there's a specific term for this that people have coined. It's called multiple potentialites. There's a book out there. I'm gonna put it right here and link it down below for you. And this woman has a lot of really good ideas for what a multiple potentialite career could look like. Some of the things she mentioned were having a career and then a hobby on the side, or skipping different careers, or having dual careers, like part-time in one field, part-time in another field. So yes, that is an issue. So I actually have first-person experience with this. As every kid did, I switched what I wanted to be when I grew up a lot. And when I was in high school, I thought I settled on piano performance, which when I declared that, my mom refused to let me take calculus, but we'll get back to that, because what point does calculus serve if you're gonna have a piano degree? But I decided against piano ultimately because I wanted to enjoy it as a hobby and not have to practice 3 hours a day. And hate the instrument by the time I was done with my degree. So I had other interests. Physics I loved, but I didn't want to get a Ph.D. in. I ultimately went practical with financial management. I didn't really know anything about the degree. I knew I wanted to get married, and if I got married, I wanted something that I could use. So that was my thinking. But when I went in as a freshman, I had to take an accounting class. And so I switched focus from financial planning or a brokerage type career to an accounting career because I loved the abstract concepts of accounting. They were reminiscent to physics to me personally. So yeah, I graduated with an accounting degree, but that's not what I thought I was going to get into when I was in high school, which is a majority of the kids in the world. You do not graduate with the degree you went into college with. So it's not just a gifted problem. And then now, of course, I am starting this YouTube channel, and I've heard this from many different people that are gifted adults. They have a career, and then they switch careers. And then they switch careers because they either get bored with their career or they take a running, flying leap into another interest. So because of that, because we have the potential to do multiple different careers, or have multiple different interests, what I would suggest for gifted individuals or any individual in high school to focus on their interests. If you know they're college bound, then definitely get their requirements in. Get the math, the history, the literature, the grammar requirements in. And I think that's fairly standard, but check any college your child's interested in for the requirements. So get those courses under your belt. But from there, let them follow their interests. So if your child wants to learn calculus and it does not fit with a fine arts degree that they're planning on, who cares? It is their interest. It is something that they may use later and go into a new career or a new degree in because it intrigues them. Practically for this video, for this channel and this new career I'm doing, I have always loved learning. I actually considered becoming a professional student because I loved my classes so much and my education so much. So that has directly influenced starting this channel because I love education so much. I love learning and all the fun things that surround that. I also have always loved public speaking. Now, I did not do too much of that in high school. I had a communications minor in college, and that was intentional. So that is now helpful for me. I'm using my communications interest here on this channel. I really loved literature growing up, particularly in high school, getting into British literature. And so now that is very useful for me. My understanding of literature and pursuit of that, which I did a little bit into college, is helpful for me evaluating literature out there and critical thinking and putting together the curriculum that I'm doing. And there's so many other things that I rabbit trailed growing up or into college into interests that I'm now putting to use, creating this channel and creating my curriculum, which hopefully will be useful for you in the future. So if your child does not know what he or she wants to be when she grows up, let her follow her interests, because most likely, even if you don't think that class or that hobby or that volunteer work or whatever is going to be beneficial for them in their practical life, if it does interest them, they most likely will be able to use it later in another career or another version, or just as part of their own personal development. Okay, one of the other questions within there was, what about dual enrollment and how much does maturity factor into it? Dual enrollment would be a phenomenal idea. I am not a fan of kids graduating early and then going off to college. And that is because of the maturity factor, but also because everyone else in the world is going to be cruel to your kids. There is enough issues already with cliques and bullying and just ostracization of people who are different from you. So that if your child goes to college at 15, typical 18 or 19-year-olds aren't going to want to give them the time of day. So they'll have no friends in college, which is an issue. And then there's the emotional maturity of handling a heavy class load. They may not be able to keep up with that, keep on top of things. They may not be able to have the emotional maturity for dealing with some of the harder subjects that would be studied in their college classes. So that is a huge factor, but dual enrollment is a brilliant solution to that. Taking college classes in high school, particularly if it's technical, like math, or maybe it's literature studies, or you can have your child go to community college. That's a possibility, but my preference probably would be to take AP advanced placement tests. I had a friend who did that when she went into college. And she skipped right into the classes that she was interested in. So it was a lot better use of your college money, taking classes that are actually at your level and that are at your interest. So that is a possibility as well. One other thing to mention here, there are many gifted kids who have entrepreneurial spirits or aren't quite sure what they want to do. This would be the perfect time for them to job shadow, like majorly job shadow, do internships. That way they can try out all these things. They can have all these fun experiences and help them focus a little bit more on what they think, yeah, I actually want to spend the time to get the skills to do this. Another thing is your gifted child does not have to go to college. I said it. Yes, your gifted child does not have to go to college. This is particularly useful for those kids who are the more autistic type. There's a podcast that I listen to, and her son, who is profoundly gifted, so like Einstein level IQ, he is starting his own photography business. He is a brilliant photographer, and he's having a lot of fun doing it. He's skipping the whole college thing. Now, he may go back later and pick up some random classes for the business side, but he is happy with that, and he's being successful with that, starting his own career in that. Other kids may go into technical skills like welding, which is fine if you're gifted, or they may be entrepreneurial, or they may want to invent, or they may be more of a free spirit and want to travel as a freelance writer. Gifted kids do not have to go to college. Let them follow their interests and explore. You may think it's a waste, but gifted people are just like any other person. We have to find our own place in society, and it will not look cookie cutter like every other gifted individual out there, because we are each unique. We each have our own unique experiences, unique abilities. So let your kid explore and follow his interests, and most likely that will lead him into the perfect career for him, or many different careers. If you guys have enjoyed this video, be sure to bump that like button and let me know it. If you've got more questions on giftedness or just anything in homeschool, drop those down in the comments. I would be happy to do another Q&A for you. And hopefully I'll turn some of these questions into more developed videos in the future too.